Hi, I'm JJ. Welcome back. It's a really hot day, so I do have the air on as well as the fans, and I'm still sweating a lot in here, so I do apologize if I'm moving my glasses around a lot because they're slipping off, but also for the noise. I'm hoping I have the camera close enough and that I'm talking loud enough, but I do apologize for the excessive noise. I just would not be able to do any videos for the whole month if I could not do it with air and a fan on. So that being said, thank you for bearing with me and for being here. Welcome back as always. I do have my reading for the month. I do have a couple different wrap-ups. I'm doing them separately. These ones I grouped together on purpose. I was reading them together. You might not immediately see the parallels here, but I read Beloved the first time by Toni Morrison, as well as Paradise Lost by John Milton. I actually had to read this one twice. I listened to it. I tried reading it physically also after, and ended up listening while reading, and I got a whole lot more out of it that way. And I do believe that this is a book that is meant to be listened to, just like as much as you can love reading Shakespeare and stuff, seeing it performed or hearing it as it's intended, I feel like is much better, just because you get to see how the sentences flow. You get to see how lyrical it really is. So I do believe that was the way to go for me, at least. And then I reread the Illiad, listened to it this time around. But reading these together was my intention, because Paradise Lost is about the fall of man and original sin, and I then read about America's original sin of slavery, which also mentions the genocide of the indigenous population here. So our two original sins. I started this on the 4th of July, if that is any indication on where my mind was at that moment. But I felt like it was a good combination to read together, along with reading about the idea of free will, along with the idea of fate and divine influence, and essentially having all of your choices being thwarted or controlled or influenced by the gods playing their games, essentially. The idea also, though, was that this was an inspiration for the Paradise Lost, because he did try to model it after all these ancient epic poems, so the Illiad by Homer, the Odyssey, and stuff like that. You can, when you're reading them side to side or listening to them, you can see those influences. In Milton, you can see the more Shakespearean type of language as well. But unlike his sonnets and stuff, like they're not the rhyming couplets and stuff like that. He chose not to rhyme on purpose because he didn't want to be confined to that kind of style of writing. And it shows that he was very intentional with his word choice. So many beautiful lines. What is interesting about Paradise Lost, before we even get into the story, is the fact that he was blind when he finished and wrote most of it. Basically, having a transcriber right for him, but also he was in exile, which makes a lot more sense when you think about Satan and the start of the story with him in hell and being in exile. And he was in exile because he was a Republican who fought against the crown, the overthrowing of the king. And when they overthrew the king, he was placed in an important role within the government by Oliver Cromwell. When the monarchy was restored, he, was not trusted and stuff, so he was, put in exile, or essentially not forced exile, but more like he was kept at a distance because of that lack of trust and stuff. So his ideas in here, you can see how they influence the story, because you don't want to have him and his people at that time did not want to have an all-powerful monarchy who controlled people's lives, cared little about the people that they were controlling, and were just like these figureheads that did whatever they wanted at their, risk and slight of everything and everyone around them. So you can see that he was against this kind of leadership and establishment. But in his argument, he was trying to show that God was different than this monarchy that we're fighting. That the monarchy controls us and is controlling and basically awful, and God loves us so much that he gave us a free will to choose, even to our own detriment. And so the arguments that he has for free will versus the arguments he gave to Lucifer or Satan are all things that you can almost see justified within his the context in which he wrote it. But he had to have a really great knowledge of the Bible and stuff. All the references and stuff he makes along the way was really intricate and interesting. But he also had to have a really great knowledge of the works before him, like Shakespeare and like Homer's epic poems and stuff like that. So just the feat of which he did this is fascinating, even before going into the story. And so I do want to talk about the story in general. There are so many layers to it. There are so many different ways to get it and understand it and interpret it. When I first read it, I was reading it along with listening to the Illiad, and I was kind of skewed in my judgment because I was seeing it like the gods and goddesses of the Illiad controlling and pulling strings of the mere mortals in their wake. And that's how I interpreted it the first time. So both God and Satan were using us in this tug of war for control over us, for control of the universe type of thing, was how I originally read it. And it was interesting because I read it that way because not only is the devil mentioned as one of the people who rose up in the rebellion against God at the start of the poem, but it also mentions a lot of the gods from other religions. So it mentions like the Egyptian gods and the Greek and Roman gods names and stuff. So it is trying to say or trying to like be this universal way of saying that all those other gods are wrong and there's just the one true one. But in doing that, it put me in that mindset of the Iliad, where these gods are just playing games with the mortals. And I don't know if that was the intention or not, but that is what I got out of it the first time around, and it was really making me upset at both characters and how little autonomy and life Adam and Eve had. So I distanced it, went back and reread, or started reading Beloved, and then went back to, after researching it and reading more about it. What's really great about it is in here, they do the argument, like what the book's going to be about, what that book or what that chapter is about. And then in this copy, which I love that there's also photo or art by Gustav Giore for each chapter, but at the end they also they do like a summary of what it was telling you about, and I actually got so much more out of it reading it that way as well as I was so I listened to it, read it, and then read it while listening to it. The first time I was kind of going back and forth. The second time I did it all together. And what was interesting is, so it starts with the rebellion. They're already fallen from heaven. They're already in hell. And Satan wants to try to find a way out. But it also explores how hell or heaven is in your own mind. You're being tortured by your regret, by your sins, by your guilt. And I believe, knowing that Milton was writing in exile, had a bit of guilt of his own in maybe his choices, but also going blind. You're in your own head a lot, and that can be, you're alone and you're in your own head. That can be the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world based on your own mind. And he was free in exile because he was creative, and he wrote this, what's considered a masterpiece. Would somebody else have been able to thrive so much in those under those circumstances, with that loneliness and being kept from society type of thing with the exile? We do get a lot of authors throughout the world who were sent in exile and then wrote their books and stuff. So they're some of the greatest thinkers in our world, though, and it shows you that their mind was freedom to them. You can only lock someone away physically. You can't lock them away mentally. And in the beginning of this, Lucifer was trapped physically, but once again not mentally. And so he was trying to justify his reasons for rebelling, trying to, like he said, he would have rather been the master of hell than a servant in heaven. He was trying to make the best of his situation, and yet it wasn't good enough. He needed more. He was not, the more he thought about it, the more he needed to avenge himself and fight again. Like, it wasn't done for him. He wanted to keep going. He wanted to destroy God in some way, and that's how he decided, well, then, and he learned about the creation of the new world, and his new playthings, which were humans, Adam and Eve. And so he wanted to go and try to destroy this new beautiful world that God created in a way to get back at him, since he could not enter heaven anymore. So his hell became of his own making, as he's sitting there dwelling on all these reasons that he was wronged by God, and all these reasons he continues to hate him. And so he then tries to rationalize it as he's trying to condemn Adam and Eve as well. And so in a way, we all read it, and as I was reading reviews and other things after I read this, everyone is talking about how charismatic and how great the character of the devil is, because it is easy to like the devil because he is all of us. He represents us in our rationalism, like when we're trying to justify why we're going against God, why we're selfish. We see so much of ourselves in him that it's so easy to like him, just because we're used to being the center of our own universe. And so it's almost lulls you into this. See, Satan was actually the hero of this story, because we want ourselves to be the heroes of the story. We don't want to see ourselves as a victim, because all of his thoughts about how important wisdom is and how important knowledge is, and we shouldn't be kept from learning, especially in a world that we're talking about now with so many book bannings, and every new regime that comes in always burns books and bans books. They want to control knowledge, and so we just ultimately always try to reject the idea of being confined and controlled in what we're thinking and what we're reading and what we're consuming. So we are going to automatically push back against that. So we understand where he's coming from. But then you also get God's point of view of how, and this is where Milton would have been writing about the monarchy. If you're following your king or your queen because you're scared they'll kill you if you don't, that is not love, that is fear. That is not being respectful of them if you're towing the line. That is not being an ally or anything of this. If you do not have any choice in the matter, if they're going to rule you no matter what, and you just kind of do what you need to do to survive under a totalitarian regime, you are going to do what it takes. And so if God did not give them that choice, if he just expected them to be obedient, if he didn't even put that tree in there to begin with so that they would have never had a freedom and just would have had this blind obedience to him, they would have not even knew what they were missing. They would have just lived forever, but oblivious to what else was out there and what choices they had and this freedom that they didn't even know they wanted. He would not have been, in his mind, worthy of this creation that he created. It would have just been this other, just another thing he created, like, the sun that shines because he made it shine, or the flowers that grow because they were planted and it is their job to grow. He wanted to make them different. He wanted to give them this choice because that's part of what made that creation so specific and so unique. And so not only does that give them the chance, yes, it makes them fall, and then they get punished for it, but it was the first real choice that they ever had. And there has to be something said for that. So that being said, you have this dual story. You have Satan and his followers who the story starts with them have already rebelled and lost. So it starts with the possibility of a redemption arc that Satan himself turns down. I already rose against you. I can't accept your forgiveness. I don't want to feel obligated to you again my whole life as you hang this over my head of what I owe you because you forgave me. He doesn't want that. So then it begins the possibility for another redemption arc, which is through the sin of Adam and Eve. And so you get to see the choices and the parallel choices and how they're different. You get to see that Satan knew what he was doing and chose to do wrong. You get to see that Adam and Eve were more innocent, and they didn't know all the answers and then choose wrong. They were deceived and did wrong, were punished for it, but had this opportunity for ultimate redemption. What's interesting is the fact that as they're paralleling these stories, you have to see how perfect the garden was, how perfect and innocent they all were, to know what they gave up, to know what they lost, to know what Satan essentially deceived them into losing and took from them. So you get that through almost a retelling of the creation story. You even get the angel Raphael going down to warn Adam that this usurper is amongst you, and telling them about what the fall was like, what the war in heaven was like, what Satan did and how they fell. He told them all this to prepare him and to warn him, even though we as readers knew that it was going to be for naught. We saw that he gave them everything he needed to know to make the right choice, and they still chose wrong. Yes, they were deceived in doing so, but it was their choice. Knowing the consequences, knowing that eating would be death. And so it was interesting. There were so many really beautiful lines and ideas. You get him understanding the war that made Satan fall, and you get to understand the warning of what will happen if you fall. But you also get Adam telling him what it was like to wake up in Eden and not know anything else, and like his new experience with the world. Same with Eve. And it was just, I just love how he wrote about this kind of beauty and this remarkableness of waking up in Eden. What was really great also is seeing all the different references that I didn't realize. So his dark materials, which is like the Philip Putman, I don't remember the last name, his series that was, the Golden Compass trilogy and stuff. There's a line in there about essentially talking Satan talk. I believe it was Satan talking about God and his dark materials created another world, and how the movie or the TV series, the book series, the trilogy, His Dark Materials, was about. It was essentially atheistic account, but it did feature other worlds, and so like you can see that was a reference to this work. Also, East of Eden is where the knowledge or the tree of knowledge of good and evil was at the east end of Eden, which then gives a little bit more significance even of Steinbeck's story, because you understand that it is a repetition of the fall as you get essentially the retelling of Cain and Abel over and over again, which would not have occurred had Adam and Eve not fallen. And so just getting all these little references here, a lot of quotes that you would have heard from of before, it was good to get them in context and see where the story was actually saying and what it was talking about. But then you get the actual fall, and God comes to Adam and Eve and, accuses them of doing wrong. And Adam, who was the one who was physically warned that there's going to be a deceiver in here who you can't trust anyone. This is the consequence if you do fall. And he's like, well, you made Eve for me, and then, how was I to believe that this perfect thing you created for me would deceive me? So yeah, I was deceived. Like, he did not take responsibility, even though he was the one who was warned fully that it would happen. And then you have Eve, who God is like, well, is that true? And she's like, yeah, the devil deceived me and I ate. And like, I kind of like that that comparison in between the two. And I had a conversation with Brian, the Krustic, because he had read it this month as well. And he was talking about, well, why would she even not be at all concerned about this talking snake? And they were literally talking to God and angels all the time. There was all this magical stuff going on. So if a serpent starts talking to her and says it was because of this tree, this magical tree that will give you knowledge too, like, it wouldn't be so weird as it is to us to be like, dude, a snake shouldn't be talking. Why are you listening to him? So she also came from this innocent place where there was no reason to believe that, like, evil existed in this world. So why would she think that there was going to be something that she couldn't trust in this Eden that God gave her? So yes, she fell for the very same reasons that Adam gave God for his fall, but she was not warned about it first. So anyway, all that to be said is then you get this story of the fall, and then it goes really quickly through the Old Testament and then up into the birth of Jesus the Redeemer, who was mentioned in this story as the Son of God, because he then, God warned him, see what Satan's doing, we have to let them make their choice, and if they do, we need a way to redeem the world. And in this version, God, Son of God, saw that and chose to allow himself to be that Redeemer later. So you also get this really interesting time thing where to God it's all cyclical. There's no before and after. It's all before him so that he can see everything that ever was and everything that ever will be, type of thing. Like, you get to see that physically manifested here. So ultimately you get that redemption arc that was hinted at the beginning with the start of Satan in hell and whether or not he could be redeemed, and then Jesus getting crucified, going to hell, and over overcoming Satan, and Satan finally getting his ultimate punishment by failing to destroy all of mankind, because now they have been redeemed, type of thing. So it's this huge arc, and very neatly beginning and end with so much beautiful poetry throughout. The writing at times is old and hard to understand, which is why for me it helped a lot listening to it while I was physically reading it, but it definitely was worth the read for me, and so it helped shape how I read Beloved, because since I was reading these two epic poems, I really saw the beauty and lyricism in Toni Morrison's writing. So this was my first Toni Morrison book. Her writing is spectacularly beautiful, just like how I was talking about Milton's word choice and how specific it is. You can tell that she arranged every sentence to be important. The way that she described things was musical in a way sometimes, which is a really almost confounding way to read such a dark story, because you're reading such beautiful writing and gorgeous prose, gorgeous words that feel like you're reading poetry about some of the most atrocious things that you can imagine happening, and it almost makes it like, not sugarcoats it, but it allows you to be with this work without being as overwhelmed as you would have been had she had different word choice, had she not wrote it so beautifully and just wrote matter-of-factly of the horrors that were happening. And so the story is, like I said, about slavery, with Setha, basically, essentially like a runaway slave who gets caught, and she ran away with her children, and she's going to try, when she finds out she's going to get caught, she's going to try to kill all of her children, and essentially, obviously herself, to not be taken back to slavery because it is so bad. But she's only able to kill her first, which is a baby, and it's so brutal. The description, and it is told kind of, it's non-chronological, so you get it kind of along the way of, like, you know it, but then you get the actual scene of when it happened later. They don't want to take her back because, you know, if you can kill your baby, then you're crazy. But is she crazy for trying to save them from this brutality? She did the one thing she thought she could do out of love and desperation. But later on, they're living in this house, and it's haunted by the ghost of the dead baby, and other ghosts as well. And it's a story, deeply emotional story about generational trauma, about trauma and guilt, and the brutality of enduring and then surviving slavery, the end of slavery. And you also almost, in a way, get the Lucifer type of character in the school teacher who is the slave owner, who feels like he's one of the good slave owners. You know how they always have the, well, not all of them were bad. You know, you owned people, you were always bad. But he tried to justify all this stuff, and yet he was doing such brutal stuff. But he educated and he had men, not, you know, regular slaves. Like, he educated them, so he was better than all the other slave masters, you know, in his mind. And so just like with Lucifer, he was justifying himself and his actions, and he didn't want to take her home because she was mad. There's no way she would have done this if she wasn't. but then you're getting these glimpses into how awful he really was, throughout the story. But later on, you also have her meet this young girl who comes to town, whose name is Beloved, which you get in a flashback also that she was going to bury her daughter, and she didn't have a name for her, but she was going to put on the tombstone, Dearly Beloved, but she actually had to sleep with the carver of the gravestone in order for him to carve something for her, and she didn't want to spend the extra time with him that it would have cost for 2 names instead of 1, so they just wrote Beloved. And now this woman is in town, and her name is Beloved, and she's the age that her daughter would have been had she lived. And so at first she feels like she's like a reincarnation of her daughter, but then it gets all very sinister, and as the guilt continues to grow and fester, ultimately it has very tragic consequences. But it's just it's a hard to explain story. I probably already gave way too many spoilers for it, but it also had this story arc with Baby Suggs, who was a slave who, so she was enslaved, but her sons bought her freedom from the school teacher, and so she got put up and was living independently as a free woman in this society of like immigrants and stuff. And when she was reunited with Setha and her kids, she wanted to, cook a whole meal and celebrate their arrival. And the townsfolk that were around were very jealous. They thought she was overreaching as this black woman. Like, you're barely free. There's no reason for you to flaunt what you have. No reason for you to try to be above your station. And they were resentful of her, and essentially were the reason that the school teacher and stuff came calling back for Setha, and started that whole chain of events and trying to get her back, because they were jealous of this newly freed enslaved woman trying to feel like she was on par or worthy of them. And it just showed there's just so many rich layers there of how entrenched in society slavery was, even for the free. So I'll be thinking about it for a while. I'm glad that I read it when I did, and I'm glad that I read it in combination of these. I feel like it was the best time for me to read it. I kept putting it off, and I know that there are just some books where it has to be the right time to read them, and I feel like that was for this one. And then just quickly, rereading the Iliad. I'm going to do a complete video later on about PTSD and classic works, mostly like with this and chosen Shakespeare plays. But for now, I wanted to talk more about the overall story of how so Achilles is, and they're in the ninth year of the Trojan War. So you have all this, the killing and the trauma and all of that stuff would be, 9 years coming. And so when he is betrayed, it does make sense that he would, lose it. But as you're getting the essential collapse of Achilles as he struggles with what we now know was PTSD, we also get this overarching story of the gods and how they're controlling all of the stuff, basically who lives and who dies. If one of the gods' favorite sons gets murdered, then they take it out on the son of another of the gods, and now the gods are still choosing sides and all that. So you have it very much about not having free will and how it is fated and controlled, and you have very little recourse of your own, which is in direct contrast to reading the other two books, Paradise Lost and Beloved, which once again in Beloved, Seth's choice to kill her children was really no choice at all, but it also was the only choice that she had available to her to try to keep them out of slavery. And yes, she only was able to kill one, but that is very meaningful and important there to realize that there was no choices. And so having the gods play around in Paradise Lost in the Illiad, it's really interesting to then see how lack of choice or having the best of the worst case scenario choice be what's left to you. I guess it meant a lot more and was a lot more significant having read these three together. Whereas Achilles' choice, once all are taken from him, is ultimately, since he goes crazy when, he lost Patroclus and then he kills Hector and spread, ruins his body and refuses to give it to his family. So out of all the lack of choices that pretty much everyone has within this story, the one choice that Achilles finally got to make for himself at the end was releasing Hector's body to Priam, so that the king could bury his son. And I think that says a lot about the kind of character Achilles would have been if we had met him prior to 9 years of war. And I think that was a great way for the story to end, to see that, yes, we know ultimately through the Illiad and the Odyssey that Achilles doesn't make it out of alive from the war, but we do see just a glimpse that he found himself again, that he got through that, the grief and the tragedy and the trauma, and was trying to get back into himself, and that almost makes his death at the end of the war so much more impactful, to know that he didn't die, he died free again. He died himself again. He didn't die in the midst of his grief or in the midst of his rage or the midst of this being lost. He finally was starting to come back into himself, and war still claimed him. And I think that's a significant part of what these stories are trying to tell, is the horrors of war. So even though it's within a story where the gods are controlling everything, it is a war, and people are dying, and you're killing, and you're seeing your loved ones die in front of you, you're burying them, and there's no end to it. 10 years, there's no end to it. And they finally, he gets an end to it by dying, but he gets to die as himself. And I just, if that's not poetic in a way, I don't know what is. But I just feel like that's why I really want to explore further the complexity of PTSD, and especially within classic works, and specifically within the soldiers within Shakespeare. I want to do a full story about all the different ways that war impacted people. I know that there's a lot of like veterans for Shakespeare and stuff like that. I would really like to be able to do something like that, volunteer and teach Shakespeare to people. But the idea that nobody is unaffected, and you can blame it on the gods, you can blame it on whoever you want, but people are still dying, and you have to live with that, and we as a society have to live with that. We have to live with the soldiers who come home having done that, and who are not fully themselves yet. And so it's something that is on our minds even more now, with all the stuff going on in the world, the stuff that we see every day and can't stop, and knowing that it doesn't end with the person dying, because you have their families who have survived, you have us who have witnessed it or seen it, you have the people who have done it. It impacts you whether people want to admit it or not. And so they knew that way back in ancient times, and have been telling us for years, and we somehow haven't gotten the memo and changed any of it. But anyway, I didn't mean to get all political. I didn't realize how infected I was by these stories until I started talking about them. But overall, very excellent month of reading, and I really hope that you got something out of this video, and I would like to know your thoughts on it, on either of these that you've read, or your intentions of reading them. As always, thank you for watching, thank you for making it this far, and happy reading, or if it's not happy reading, at least I hope that you get something out of your reading. Thank you.